The flames licked at the darkening sky, casting an angry orange glow across the Kansas prairie, as Tabitha Zimmerman stood watching everything she had built with her own hands turn to ash. Her fists clenched at her sides, tears streaming silently down her dirt-smudged face, but she refused to give the men on horseback the satisfaction of seeing her break. Wilson, Kansas in 1876, was supposed to be her fresh start, not another nightmare. "Last chance to sign the papers, Miss Zimmerman," called Edmund Garrett, the railway man who'd been hounding her for months. His expensive suit gleamed in the firelight as he sat smugly on his horse, flanked by his hired thugs. "The railroad's coming through with or without your cooperation." Tabitha swiped angrily at her tears. At 26, she'd already survived more than most women twice her age the loss of her parents, a war that tore the nation apart, and the subsequent journey west with nothing but determination and her father's old rifle. This land was rightfully hers, purchased with hard-earned money and the promised deed that now resided in the bank in town. "I've told you 100 times, Mr. Garrett, this land isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever." Her voice didn't waver despite the devastation before her. The small cabin had taken her nearly a year to build, and now it was gone in minutes. Garrett's face twisted with annoyance. "You'll regret this stubbornness, woman. Winter's coming and you've got nowhere to sleep tonight." He turned his horse away, motioning to his men. "Let's go, boys. She'll come crawling to us soon enough." As the riders disappeared into the gathering darkness, Tabitha finally allowed herself to sink to her knees in the dirt. The autumn wind cut through her thin dress, and reality sank in like a stone in water. Everything she owned was gone. Her supplies, her food stores for winter, the quilt her mother had made all turned to cinders before her eyes. "Madam, you all right?" The deep voice startled her, and Tabitha scrambled to her feet, reaching for the rifle that wasn't there. It too had been lost to the flames. A tall figure approached slowly on horseback, silhouetted against the last burning embers of her home. As he drew closer, she could make out a weather-beaten face beneath a wide-brimmed hat, perhaps 30 years of age, with kind eyes that reflected the dying fire. "I'm fine," she lied, squaring her shoulders and wiping her face. "Just passing through." The stranger dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd spent most of his life on horseback. His clothes marked him as a cowboy worn leather chaps over denim pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing tanned, muscular forearms, and a red bandana tied loosely around his neck. "Don't look like you're passing through," he observed quietly, glancing at the smoldering remains of the cabin. "Looks to me like someone just burned you out." "What business is it of yours?" Tabitha shot back, too hurt and angry to mind her manners. Instead of taking offense, the cowboy simply removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Name's Liam O'Malley. I work at the Carson Ranch about 5 miles east." He nodded toward the burned cabin. "Was that your place?" Something in his steady gaze made Tabitha relent. "Yes, railroad men want my land I refuse to sell." Liam's jaw tightened as he surveyed the destruction. "That ain't right. A person's home is sacred." He turned back to her. "You have somewhere to go for the night, miss." "Zimmerman, Tabitha Zimmerman." She lifted her chin. "And no, but I'll manage." Liam looked up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear. "Storm coming tomorrow. You can't stay out here." He seemed to consider something for a moment before continuing. "My boss has an old line shack about a mile from here. Not much, but it's got a roof. You could stay there until you figure things out." Tabitha eyed him suspiciously. Out here, accepting help from a stranger, especially a man, could be dangerous. But there was something straightforward about Liam O'Malley that didn't set off warnings in her mind. "Why would you help me?" You don't know me, Liam shrugged. My ma raised me to help folks in trouble. Besides, he added, a hint of anger creeping into his voice, I've seen what those railroad types do. It ain't right, burning someone out of their home. A gust of wind made Tabitha shiver, and reality settled on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Pride was one thing, freezing to death was another. I'd be grateful for shelter tonight, she conceded. But tomorrow I'm coming back to salvage what I can. Liam nodded. I'll help you. I didn't ask for, no, you didn't, he interrupted gently. But 4 hands work faster than 2. He turned back to his horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding, and extended his hand. Come on, it'll be dark soon. Tabitha hesitated only a moment before taking his hand and allowing him to help her onto the horse. She settled behind him, reluctantly placing her hands at his waist as he turned the animal away from the ruins of her home. As they rode in silence through the gathering darkness, Tabitha couldn't help but wonder if this was the universe's strange way of offering her a lifeline, just when everything seemed lost. The line shack was indeed small, barely more than a one-room structure with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and some basic supplies. Still, it was shelter, and Tabitha was grateful as Liam lit a fire and the warmth began to chase away the autumn chill. It's not much, Liam said apologetically, setting a dented coffee pot on the small iron stove. But it'll keep you dry. It's more than I had an hour ago, Tabitha replied, still standing awkwardly near the door. She felt suddenly conscious of her appearance, dress smudged with soot, hair falling from its pins, face streaked with tears and dirt. Liam seemed to sense her discomfort. I'll head back to the main ranch and let them know where I am. Bring back some provisions in the morning. He paused. Unless you'd rather I stayed outside, I can sleep in the lean-to with the horse. Tabitha shook her head quickly. No, that's not necessary. She took a deep breath. I appreciate your help, Mr. O'Malley, truly. Just Liam is fine. He poured water from a canteen into the coffee pot. Mr. O'Malley was my father, and even he didn't much care for the title. A small smile tugged at Tabitha's lips despite everything. Then you must call me Tabitha. As the coffee began to bubble, Liam rummaged through a trunk in the corner, producing a clean shirt and a pair of trousers. These might be big on you, but they're clean. There's a creek about 50 yards behind the shack if you want to wash up. Tabitha accepted the clothes gratefully. Thank you. When she returned from the creek some time later, hair damp and wearing Liam's oversized clothing with the sleeves and pant legs rolled up multiple times, she found he'd set out 2 tin cups of coffee and some jerky on the small table. It's not much of a supper, he apologized. It's perfect. Tabitha sat across from him, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. I don't know how to thank you. Liam studied her for a moment. Can I ask what brought you out here? Most women don't homestead alone. Tabitha took a sip of the strong coffee before answering. My father died after the war. We lost our farm in Missouri, and I heard there was land available out here. She shrugged. I saved every penny working as a seamstress, bought the plot legally 2 years ago, built that cabin myself. That's mighty impressive, Liam said, genuine admiration in his voice. And now it's gone. Tabitha couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. They think because I'm a woman alone, I'll give up and move on. Will you? Liam asked quietly. Tabitha met his gaze, determination hardening her features. Not a chance. A slow smile spread across Liam's face. I was hoping you'd say that. They talked late into the night. Liam told her about growing up in Chicago, the son of Irish immigrants, how he'd headed west after the war looking for open skies and honest work. He'd been with the Carson Ranch for 3 years now, saving money with the hope of someday having his own piece of land. Tabitha shared stories of her childhood in Missouri, her father's wheat farm, and how the war had changed everything. How she'd taught herself to hunt, to build, to survive. When exhaustion finally caught up with them, Liam insisted Tabitha take the bed while he made do with a bedroll on the floor near the fire. Despite her protests, she was too tired to argue for long. As she drifted toward sleep, listening to the soft crackle of the fire and Liam's steady breathing, Tabitha realized this was the first time in years she hadn't felt completely alone. Dawn came with the promised storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Liam was already up, stoking the fire when Tabitha woke. "We should head to your place before the rain hits," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. "See what can be saved." They rode double on Liam's horse back to the charred remains of Tabitha's cabin. In the harsh light of day, the destruction looked even more complete. The roof had collapsed entirely, and most of the walls were reduced to blackened stumps. Tabitha fought back tears as she dismounted and began carefully picking through the debris. To her surprise, she managed to salvage more than expected. An iron skillet buried under the collapsed table, some tools that had been hanging on the far wall, a few articles of clothing from her trunk that were only singed around the edges, and most precious of all, a small tin box containing her mother's locket and her father's pocket watch. "Look at this," Liam called from what had been the corner of her cabin. He held up her rifle, miraculously intact though the stock was scorched. "Fell behind the wood box. Seems the fire didn't reach it." Tabitha took the weapon gratefully, checking that the action still worked. "At least I can still hunt." They worked until midday, salvaging what they could and loading it onto Liam's horse. The first fat drops of rain were beginning to fall as they finished. "We should get back," Liam said, glancing at the darkening sky. "This is going to be a bad one." Tabitha looked around at the ruins of her home one last time. "What am I going to do, Liam? Winter's coming. I can't rebuild before the snow." Liam was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have an idea, but you might not like it. I'm open to suggestions at this point. I've got 3 months' wages saved. It's not much, but it's enough for lumber and supplies." He met her eyes steadily. "Let me help you rebuild. A proper cabin, bigger than before. Something that'll stand up to winter and those railroad men." Tabitha stared at him, stunned. "I can't accept your money. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Liam replied simply. "I know you're brave enough to come out here alone, strong enough to build a home with your own hands, and stubborn enough not to let those men run you off your land." He smiled slightly. "Seems like someone worth helping to me." The rain was coming down harder now, plastering Tabitha's hair to her face. "Why would you do this?" Liam's expression grew serious. "Because it's wrong what they did to you. Because nobody stood up for my family when we needed it most back in Chicago." He paused. "And because I've been looking for a purpose out here beyond just earning wages. This feels right." Tabitha searched his face for any sign of deception, any hidden motive, but found only sincerity. "I can't pay you back, not for a long while." "I'm not asking for payment," Liam said. "Just let me help. We can talk to Mr. Carson, he's a fair man. Might even lend us some of the ranch hands to help with the raising." Thunder rumbled overhead and the rain began to pour in earnest. Tabitha made her decision. "All right," she said, raising her voice over the storm. "But we're partners in this. I work alongside you and I'll pay you back somehow, someday." Liam grinned, water streaming from the brim of his hat. "Deal." He extended his hand and they shook on it as the heavens opened up above them. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. True to his word, Liam spoke to his employer, Mr. Carson, who not only gave him leave to help Tabitha, but also offered lumber from the ranch's supply and promised to send a couple of hands to assist with the building. Why would he do that? Tabitha asked when Liam returned with the news. Mr. Carson doesn't much care for the railroad men either, Liam explained. They've been pressuring him to sell a corner of the ranch for months. Besides, he says a woman homesteading alone has moxie, and he respects that. They drew up plans for the new cabin together, sitting at the small table in the lined shack by lamplight. Liam had experience from helping build structures on the Carson ranch, and Tabitha knew what would work best for her needs. "We'll make it twice the size of your old one," Liam said, sketching on a piece of paper. "2 rooms instead of 1, proper windows with glass, a stone chimney that won't catch fire easy." "That's too much," Tabitha protested. "The materials alone, Carson's providing most of the lumber, and there's stone aplenty on your land," Liam pointed out. "We can do this, Tabitha. Build something those railroad men will think twice about burning down." Each day, they would ride out to Tabitha's land and work from sunup to sundown. First clearing the debris, then marking the foundation, digging post holes, and hauling stones from a nearby creek bed for the chimney foundation. True to his word, Mr. Carson sent 2 ranch hands to help for 3 days with the heaviest work raising the frame and setting the roof beams. The men worked hard and treated Tabitha with respect, impressed by her willingness to work alongside them hauling lumber and driving nails. As October gave way to November, the cabin began to take shape larger and sturdier than her previous home. Tabitha found herself looking forward to each day, despite the backbreaking work. There was something about building alongside Liam that filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. In the evenings, they would return to the lined shack exhausted but satisfied, sharing simple meals and talking late into the night. Liam told her stories about life on the ranch, about the characters he'd met in his travels. Tabitha shared memories of her parents, dreams of someday having a small herd of cattle, maybe even an orchard. "You've thought this all through," Liam observed one night as they sat by the fire, the November wind howling outside. "I have to," Tabitha replied. "When you're alone in the world, planning is what keeps you going." She glanced at him across the small space. "What about you? What's your plan?" Liam stared into the flames for a long moment. "Used to be simple, save enough to buy my own spread someday, but lately—" He trailed off. "Lately," Tabitha prompted. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Lately I've been thinking there's more to life than just having your own piece of land. It's about who you share it with." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Tabitha felt her cheeks warm, and it wasn't from the fire. "We should get some rest," she said finally, breaking the moment. "Early start tomorrow if we want to finish the roof before the snow comes." Liam nodded, but his eyes lingered on her face a moment longer before he turned away to prepare his bedroll. That night, as she lay in the narrow bed, Tabitha found herself wondering what it might be like to have someone like Liam in her life permanently, not just as a helping hand, but as a partner. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She'd been on her own so long, the idea of depending on anyone else seemed foreign. Yet each day, as they worked side by side, something was shifting between them, like the changing of seasons, gradual but inevitable. The first snow came earlier than expected, dusting the prairie white one mid-November morning. They had just finished the roof the day before, and were working on the interior walls when the flakes began to fall. "Perfect timing," Liam said, standing in the doorway of the new cabin and watching the snowfall. "Another day and we'd have been in trouble." Tabitha joined him, marveling at how much they'd accomplished in just 3 weeks. The cabin was indeed twice the size of her old one, with 2 distinct rooms, a proper stone chimney, and real glass windows ordered from the general store in town. They still needed to finish the interior walls and build furniture, but it was already more home than she'd had before. "I can't believe we did this," she said softly. Liam glanced down at her. "You doubted we would, not your ability. Mine." She wrapped her arms around herself, watching the snow gather on the new porch. "After they burned me out for just a moment, I wondered if they were right. If I was foolish to think I could make it out here alone." "You're the least foolish person I know," Liam said firmly, "and you've proven you can make it. Look at this place." He gestured to the cabin. "You did this, Tabitha. I just helped with the heavy lifting." She turned to face him fully. "You did much more than that, Liam O'Malley, and you know it. Without you, I'd probably be on a train east by now." His eyes softened as he looked down at her. "I doubt that. You're too stubborn. Determined," she corrected with a small smile. "That too." He reached out tentatively, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The simple touch sent warmth spreading through her despite the chill in the air. The moment was broken by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. They both turned to see 3 riders coming through the falling snow. "Railroad men," Tabitha whispered, recognizing Garrett's silhouette. Liam's face hardened. "Stay here." He stepped out onto the porch as the riders approached, his hand resting casually near the revolver on his hip. Tabitha ignored his instruction and moved to stand beside him, her salvaged rifle now in her hands. Garrett pulled his horse to a stop a few yards from the cabin, looking genuinely surprised to see the new structure. The 2 men with him were not the same ones who had burned Tabitha's cabin. These were younger, rougher looking. "Miss Zimmerman," Garrett said, tipping his hat with mock politeness. "I see you've been busy." "Mr. Garrett," Tabitha replied coolly, "this is private property. State your business." Garrett's gaze shifted to Liam. "I don't believe we've met, Liam O'Malley." His tone made it clear further introduction was unnecessary. "Well, Mr. O'Malley, you should know you're investing your time in a lost cause." Garrett turned his attention back to Tabitha. "The railroad is coming through, Miss Zimmerman. The survey's complete, the plans approved. This land will be ours one way or another." "My deed says otherwise," Tabitha replied. "And this time, if anything happens to my home, the sheriff will know exactly who to look for." One of Garrett's men shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward his gun, but Garrett raised a hand to stop him. "We're not here for trouble today," Garrett said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just bringing a message. The offer for your land has doubled. It's more than generous." "Not interested," Tabitha said firmly. Garrett's face darkened. "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake would be thinking threats will change my mind," Tabitha replied, raising her rifle slightly. "Now, as I said, this is private property." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Garrett reined his horse around. "This isn't over, Miss Zimmerman." His eyes flickered to Liam. "You'd be wise to distance yourself from this situation, O'Malley." "I'll decide what's wise for myself," Liam replied evenly. With a final glare, Garrett and his men rode away, disappearing into the swirling snow. Once they were gone, Tabitha let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "They'll be back." Liam nodded grimly. "Yes, they will." He turned to her. "Which is why I'm staying here tonight." "Liam, you don't have to, I do." His expression was resolute. "I don't trust them, especially now that they've seen the new cabin. I'll sleep by the fire, just until we're sure they're not planning anything." Tabitha wanted to argue but knew he was right. "All right, but just for tonight." One night turned into 2, then 3. The snow continued to fall intermittently, and they used the time to work on the interior of the cabin, building a table, chairs, a bed frame. Liam rode to the Carson ranch each morning to check in and collect his things, explaining the situation to his employer, who understood completely and even sent more supplies. "Mr. Carson says to tell you he admires your spunk," Liam reported, returning with a sack of provisions one afternoon. Says if you ever need work, his wife could use help with the accounts. Apparently, she's been after him to hire someone with proper schooling. Tabitha looked up from the chair she was sanding. Really? That's unexpected. Liam shrugged off his coat, hanging it by the door. Not really. Carson's always said he values brains as much as brawn, and I might have mentioned you taught school for a while back east. You remembered that? Tabitha was surprised. She'd only mentioned it once briefly during one of their evening conversations. Liam met her eyes. I remember everything you tell me, Tabitha. Something in his gaze made her heart beat faster, and she quickly looked back down at her work. Well, it's good to know there might be other opportunities nearby if things don't work out here. They will, Liam said with quiet confidence, coming to stand beside her. We've built this place to last. The word hung in the air between them, full of possibility. That evening, as they sat before the fire in the newly finished cabin, Tabitha finally asked the question that had been on her mind for days. What happens when we finish the cabin, Liam? Will you go back to the ranch full time? Liam was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Is that what you want? I asked first, she said softly. He looked up, meeting her gaze. No, that's not what I want. Tabitha's heart skipped a beat. What do you want then? Liam set aside the piece of wood he'd been whittling and moved to sit beside her on the bench they'd built together. I want to stay, Tabitha. Not just because of Garrett and his threats, because— he took a deep breath. Because these weeks with you have been the best of my life. Because working alongside you, building something together, it feels right in a way nothing else ever has. Tabitha's hands trembled slightly in her lap. Liam, let me finish, he said gently. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a short while, but out here, life moves differently. Time means something else. He reached for her hand, enveloping it in his larger one. I'm not asking for promises, just a chance to see if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, can grow into something real. Tabitha looked down at their joined hands, then back up to his earnest face. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of you, of this. Of depending on someone again, of building a life that could be taken away. I understand fear, Liam said, but I also understand courage, and you, Tabitha Zimmerman, are the bravest person I've ever known. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I'm not asking you to depend on me. I'm asking if we can depend on each other. The fire crackled in the hearth they'd built together, casting warm light across the cabin that had risen from ashes because of their combined efforts. Outside, snow fell gently on the Kansas prairie, but inside, Tabitha felt a different kind of warmth spreading through her. Yes, she whispered finally. I'd like that chance, Liam. His smile was like sunrise after a long night. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. When they broke apart, Liam rested his forehead against hers. I should still sleep by the fire, he said with a reluctant smile. Tabitha laughed softly. Yes, you should. For now. The days grew shorter and colder as December arrived, but inside the cabin, warmth prevailed. They finished the interior just as the first real blizzard of the season hit, trapping them inside for 3 days. They passed the time reading from Liam's small collection of books, playing cards and planning for spring planting, and talking. Always talking. About childhoods and dreams, fears and hopes. About the future tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. I've been thinking, Liam said one evening as they sat before the fire, his arm around her shoulders. This land of yours is good for more than just crops. The creek doesn't run dry even in summer. Perfect for cattle. I've thought the same, Tabitha admitted, but starting a herd takes money. I've got savings, Liam pointed out. Not enough for many head to start, but enough for a few. We could build from there. We, Tabitha looked up at him. Liam met her gaze steadily. Yes, if you'll have me as a partner in everything. Tabitha's heart raced as she realized what he was really asking. Are you proposing, Liam O'Malley? I reckon I am, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Not very romantically, I'm afraid. I don't need romance, Tabitha said softly. I just need honesty and you. You have both, Liam promised, taking her hands in his. Tabitha Zimmerman, will you marry me? Build a life with me on this land you fought so hard to keep. Tabitha felt tears well in her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Liam's face broke into a radiant smile as he gathered her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. The blizzard kept them isolated for another week, but neither minded. They used the time to plan their future, a small wedding in town once the weather cleared, a modest beginning to their cattle operation in spring, improvements to the cabin as they could afford them. When the snow finally stopped and the sun emerged, Liam rode to the Carson ranch to share their news and collect his belongings. He returned with not only his possessions, but also a wedding gift from the Carsons, a pair of young heifers to start their herd. Mrs. Carson insisted, Liam explained as he unpacked. Says every bride needs a proper gift and she couldn't think of anything more useful out here. Tabitha was touched by the gesture. We'll have to invite them to the wedding. Already did, Liam grinned. They're bringing the pastor with them next Sunday, weather permitting. So soon? Tabitha's eyes widened. Too soon? Liam asked, suddenly concerned. Tabitha smiled, shaking her head. No, perfect timing, actually. True to their word, the Carsons arrived the following Sunday with the pastor from Wilson, along with 3 ranch hands who had helped with the cabin raising. The small ceremony took place in the main room of the cabin Liam and Tabitha had built together. With the winter sun streaming through the windows, they had installed side by side. Tabitha wore her best dress, freshly pressed, with her mother's locket around her neck. Liam had somehow procured a new shirt for the occasion and had shaved his trail beard, revealing a strong jaw and a dimple in his right cheek that Tabitha had never noticed before. As they spoke their vows before their small gathering of friends, Tabitha felt a sense of completeness she'd thought lost forever after her parents' deaths. Here, in this cabin risen from ashes, she had found not just shelter but home, not just help but partnership, not just affection but love. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful, a meal prepared by Mrs. Carson, who had insisted on bringing provisions, music from a fiddle played by one of the ranch hands, and plenty of good wishes for the newlyweds. As the short winter day faded to dusk, their guests prepared to leave, not wanting to travel after dark. You two take care of each other, Mr. Carson said, shaking Liam's hand firmly. And don't worry about those railroad men. Word in town is they're moving the line route south after all. Seems they ran into unexpected resistance here. He winked at Tabitha. After their guests departed, Tabitha and Liam stood on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the snow-covered prairie. Liam's arm wrapped around Tabitha's waist, pulling her close against the cold. Mrs. O'Malley, he said, testing the name on his tongue, has a nice ring to it. Tabitha leaned into his embrace. It does indeed, Mr. O'Malley. Are you happy, Tabitha? He asked softly. With this? With me? She turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. Happier than I ever thought possible. When they burned my cabin, I thought I'd lost everything, but now I see it was just making way for something better. She glanced at their home, then back to his face. A better home, a better life, with you. Liam's eyes shone with emotion as he bent to kiss her, a promise and a pledge sealed with tenderness. When they broke apart, breathless despite the cold, He rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Tabitha O'Malley," he whispered. "And I love you, Liam O'Malley," she replied, her heart full to bursting. "Now, husband, shall we go inside? We have a life to begin." Hand in hand, they entered their cabin, closing the door on the gathering darkness outside. The fire welcomed them with its warm glow, illuminating the home they had built together not just of wood and stone, but of hope, courage, and love. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers across the prairie and new beginnings for the O'Malleys. True to Mr. Carson's information, the railroad had indeed rerouted their lines several miles south, leaving Tabitha's land untouched. They'd heard Garrett had been reassigned to another territory, his failure to secure the land a black mark on his record. With the threat of the railroad gone, Liam and Tabitha threw themselves into building their future. The two heifers from the Carsons had grown healthy through the winter, and with Liam's savings, they purchased a sturdy bull and 3 more cows, the beginnings of what they hoped would become a prosperous herd. They planted a vegetable garden near the cabin and broke ground on 10 acres for wheat and corn. Liam built a proper barn and corral, while Tabitha started a small flock of chickens. Each evening, they would sit on their porch and survey their growing homestead with pride and satisfaction. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed in just 6 months," Tabitha said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. Her head rested on Liam's shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her. "Good changes, I hope," Liam replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. Tabitha smiled, placing a hand over her still flat stomach. "The very best kind." Liam went still beside her. "Tabitha, are you saying?" She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Yes. Come winter, there will be 3 O'Malleys on this homestead." Liam's face transformed with joy as he gathered her into his arms, his laughter mingling with her own. "A baby, when did you know?" "I've suspected for a few weeks," Tabitha admitted, "but I wanted to be sure before I told you." Liam's hand gently covered hers over her stomach, his expression one of wonder. "A family, our family." His voice was thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd be so blessed." "Nor I," Tabitha whispered. "After losing my parents, I never thought I'd have a family again. And now—" She blinked back happy tears. "Now I have you, and soon our child." That night, as they lay together in the bed they shared, Liam's hand rested protectively over Tabitha's stomach, as if already shielding their unborn child. "Boy or girl doesn't matter to me," he murmured sleepily. "Just healthy and strong like their mother." Tabitha smiled in the darkness. "And kind and brave like their father." The summer passed in a blur of activity. Their garden flourished under Tabitha's careful tending, and the cattle grew fat on the rich prairie grass. 2 of their cows calved, increasing their small herd. Liam built an addition to the cabin, a nursery for their expected child, while Tabitha sewed tiny garments in the evenings. Word spread about the O'Malley homestead, and occasionally travelers would stop by, seeking a meal or a place to rest their horses. Tabitha and Liam never turned anyone away, remembering all too well how important a helping hand could be. As Tabitha's belly grew, so did their dreams for the future. They spoke of expanding the herd, adding an orchard, perhaps eventually building a larger house as their family grew. This land could support at least 50 head of cattle, Liam said one evening as they walked the property, his hand steadying Tabitha as she navigated the uneven ground. "And that rise over there would be perfect for an orchard sheltered from the worst of the winter winds." Tabitha squeezed his hand. "You've really thought about this?" "Every day," Liam admitted with a smile. "Planning our future is my favorite pastime." "Mine too," Tabitha said, placing his hand on her rounded belly where their child kicked vigorously. And I think someone else is eager to join in the planning. Liam's face lit up as he felt the movement. Strong little thing, isn't he? Or she? Just like their father, Tabitha replied, leaning into his embrace. Determined and full of life. As autumn painted the prairie in hues of gold and amber, Tabitha's time grew near. Mrs. Carson came to stay at the cabin, her experience with childbirths making her presence invaluable. "You've built a fine life here," the older woman observed as she helped Tabitha prepare the nursery. "When Liam first came to us, he was restless, always looking toward the horizon. Now he looks at you like you are his horizon." Tabitha blushed, smoothing the quilt she'd made for the cradle Liam had crafted. "He's my horizon, too. I never expected to find him to find this life when I came west." "The best things in life are rarely what we expect," Mrs. Carson said wisely. "But they're exactly what we need, when we need them most." On a crisp November morning, exactly 1 year after Garrett's men had burned Tabitha's original cabin, their son came into the world after a long night of labor. Liam, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom door throughout the ordeal, was finally allowed in to meet his son. The sight of Tabitha, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in the quilt she had sewn, brought tears to his eyes. He approached the bed almost reverently, sitting carefully beside his wife. "Say hello to your son, Liam," Tabitha said softly, pulling back the blanket to reveal a perfect tiny face topped with a wisp of dark hair. "He's beautiful," Liam whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's cheek. "Perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Tabitha asked. Liam nodded, his throat too tight with emotion to speak. Carefully, Tabitha placed their son in his arms, showing him how to support the baby's head. Looking down at his son's face, Liam felt his heart expand with a love so profound it left him breathless. "What shall we call him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, wanting to see their child first. Tabitha watched her husband and son with tired eyes full of love. "I was thinking Thomas after my father, Thomas Liam O'Malley." "Thomas," Liam repeated, testing the name. "It suits him. Strong name for a strong boy." He leaned down to kiss Tabitha's forehead. "Thank you for this gift, my love, for our son, for everything." "Thank you for rebuilding my home," Tabitha replied softly. "And for giving me a family again." Mrs. Carson, who had been quietly cleaning up, slipped from the room to give the new family privacy, wiping tears from her own eyes at the tender scene. As winter once again blanketed the prairie in snow, the O'Malley cabin was a haven of warmth and joy. Young Thomas thrived under the doting attention of his parents, growing stronger each day. The cabin that had risen from ashes now rang with a baby's laughter and the happy conversations of a family building their future together. On Christmas Eve, with Thomas sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Liam and Tabitha sat before the fire, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. "I have something for you," Liam said, reaching into his pocket and producing a small package wrapped in brown paper. Tabitha took it with surprise. "But we agreed not to exchange gifts this year, with the baby and all the expenses." "Some things are worth breaking agreements for," Liam replied with a smile. "Open it." Tabitha carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a small wooden carving of their cabin, perfectly detailed right down to the porch where they often sat to watch the sunset. "Oh, Liam," she breathed, tracing the tiny details with her finger. "It's beautiful. When did you find time to make this?" "I worked on it a bit each night after you fell asleep," he admitted. "Turn it over." Tabitha flipped the carving to find words carefully burned into the base. "From Ashes to Paradise, L. and T. O'Malley, 1876. Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at her husband. "It's perfect. Thank you." She leaned forward to kiss him softly. "I thought we could make it a tradition," Liam said, wrapping his arm around her. "Each Christmas, I'll carve something new to mark another year in our life together." "I love that idea," Tabitha said, nestling against his chest. "And I love you, Liam O'Malley." "I love you too, Tabitha O'Malley," he replied, his voice warm with affection. "More than I have words to say." As the fire crackled in the hearth of the cabin they had built together, Liam and Tabitha held each other close, their sleeping son nearby, their future stretching before them like the vast Kansas prairie full of promise, possibility, and love. The years passed like pages turning in a well-loved book, each season bringing new joys and challenges to the O'Malley homestead. Their cattle herd grew steadily, as did their family. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Tabitha gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Liam's mother. 3 years later, another son joined the family, William, a sturdy boy with his mother's determination and his father's easy smile. The cabin that Liam had rebuilt for Tabitha eventually gave way to a larger farmhouse as their family and prosperity grew. But they kept the cabin standing, using it as a guest house for visitors, and later as a playhouse for their children. True to his word, each Christmas Liam carved a new piece to commemorate the year: a tiny cattle herd when they sold their first steers at market, a rocking chair when Sarah was born, a schoolhouse when Tabitha began teaching the children of neighboring homesteads. Their land flourished under their care. The orchard that Liam had envisioned on the sheltered rise took root and began to bear fruit. Fields of wheat and corn stretched golden in the summer sun. The cattle herd, now numbering over 60 head, grazed peacefully on the rich prairie grass. Most precious of all was the love that had sparked in the aftermath of destruction and grown into a bond as enduring as the house they had built together. Through blizzards and droughts, through the joys of births and the sorrows of losing Mrs. Carson to influenza one harsh winter, Liam and Tabitha remained each other's strength and solace. On their 20th anniversary, with their children nearly grown, Thomas at 19 preparing to attend college back east, Sarah at 17 already being courted by a neighboring rancher's son, and William at 14 showing every sign of wanting to follow in his father's footsteps, Liam took Tabitha for a walk to the spot where her original cabin had stood. The site was now marked by a circular garden of prairie flowers that bloomed from spring through fall, a place of beauty risen from destruction. 20 years, Liam marveled, his hair now streaked with silver at the temples, though his eyes were as bright as ever. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday I rode up and found you standing in the ashes of your cabin." Tabitha, still beautiful at 46, squeezed his hand. "And sometimes it feels like I've loved you forever." "You ever regret it?" Liam asked, suddenly serious. "Staying here, rebuilding, taking a chance on a wandering cowboy." Tabitha turned to face him fully, her hands coming up to frame his beloved face. "Not for a single moment, Liam O'Malley. You didn't just rebuild my cabin. You helped me build a life, a wonderful, beautiful life." Liam smiled, the same smile that still made her heart skip a beat after all these years. "I was thinking about what you said that day, about the railroad men thinking because you were a woman alone, you'd give up and move on." "I remember," Tabitha nodded. "You proved them wrong," Liam said proudly. "We proved them wrong, and look at what rose from those ashes." He gestured toward their home in the distance, where their children could be seen doing their evening chores. "A family, a legacy. All because you stopped to help a stubborn woman who refused to leave her land," Tabitha said with a smile. "Best decision I ever made," Liam replied, drawing her into his arms. "Though I think the stubborn woman deserves most of the credit. She's the heart of everything we've built." As the sun set over the prairie they had tamed together, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, much like the day they had first met. Liam and Tabitha held each other close, grateful for the fire that had brought them together and the love that had built a life from ashes. In the years that followed, the O'Malley homestead became known throughout Kansas as a place of prosperity and welcome. Travelers spoke of the handsome house with its well-tended orchard, the healthy cattle, and most of all, of the couple who had created it all, the stubborn woman who refused to be driven from her land, and the cowboy who had helped her rebuild, bigger and stronger than before. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings, Liam and Tabitha would sit on their porch and look out over their domain with wonder in their eyes, remembering a burned cabin and the unlikely love that had risen from its ashes, well, that was their own precious secret, the foundation of everything they had built together in the wild Kansas prairie.